He's micro-cheating. With me. Classroom confessions. The acceptance letter felt like a golden ticket. A funded teaching assistantship at a university with a real reputation. I'd spent the last few years adjuncting, scraping by, and this was finally at a chance to actually build a career. Professor Hayes. His name was practically whispered in academic circles. Published young, dynamic lecturer, everyone said he was a rising star. And he was attractive in that slightly rumpled, intellectual way. The first time I saw him in person at the departmental welcome picnic, I felt a jolt. Dark hair perpetually falling across his forehead, kind eyes that seemed to see right through you. Amelia, right? He'd extended a hand, his grip firm. Ethan Hayes, welcome to the team. His smile was disarming, and it lingered a beat too long. I chalked it up to nerves my own. I was determined to make a good impression. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Syllabi to review, lectures to prep, student emails to answer. Ethan was demanding but fair. He expected a lot, but he also seemed to genuinely appreciate my input. He'd stay late after our meetings, discussing complex philosophical concepts, bouncing ideas off me. He made me feel smart, validated, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Then the emails started. Initially, they were strictly about the course, thinking about restructuring the second module. What are your thoughts on incorporating Foucault? Perfectly normal. But then they started drifting. He'd mention his day, the endless meetings, the pressure to publish, the tantrums of his toddler daughter. Harmless enough, but they were frequent. Several a day, sometimes late into the night. Just grading papers one would read at 11:47 p.m. Needed a brain break. You ever feel like you're drowning in student essays? I found myself responding, sharing my own anxieties, my own frustrations with the academic grind. It felt intimate, like we were sharing a secret. Then the texts. Hey, just checking in. Did that student ever email you back about the reading assignment? The first time I'd been surprised he even had my number. He'd said Professor Thompson gave it to him. I hadn't questioned it. I started looking forward to those texts. To the ping of my inbox, anticipation of his name flashing across my screen. I'd find myself crafting witty, intelligent replies, wanting to impress him. Chloe, another TA, noticed. We were grabbing coffee one afternoon, venting about grading papers. You and Hayes seem pretty close, she said casually, stirring her latte. He's a good mentor, I replied, a little defensively. He really values my input. Chloe's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. He's charismatic. Just be careful, okay? I frowned. Careful of what? She shrugged. Just departmental politics can be tricky, that's all. I dismissed her concerns. Chloe was probably just jealous. She'd been passed over for a research opportunity that I'd been offered, assisting Ethan with a new project. The research project was another step closer. More one-on-one meetings, more late nights in his office, poring over articles and data. He'd lean in close, pointing out passages, his arm brushing against mine. I'd feel a shiver, a mix of excitement and unease. During one of these sessions, he started talking about his wife, Sarah. How she was a wonderful mother, but how they'd grown apart. How he felt suffocated by the routine of family life. It's like I'm living someone else's life, he confessed, his voice low and strained. I look around and I don't recognize myself anymore. I didn't say anything. I just listened, feeling a strange mixture of sympathy and something else, something I couldn't quite name. I told my brother David about it during our weekly phone call. He's always been my rock, my voice of reason. Amelia, this sounds weird, he said bluntly. He's your boss. He's married. This isn't appropriate. I know, I said, feeling a familiar wave of guilt wash over me. But it's not like anything's happening. We're just talking. Talking about his marital problems. To you. That's crossing a line. Be careful, Leah. You just got there. Don't jeopardize your career for this. He was right. I knew he was right. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was special to Ethan. That he saw something in me that no one else did. The departmental holiday party was excruciating. Sarah Hayes was there, a warm, friendly woman with tired eyes. She was surrounded by other faculty wives, talking about kids and holiday plans. Ethan seemed distant, almost avoidant of her. I watched them from across the room, a glass of cheap wine clutched in my hand. Sarah caught my eye and smiled. I smiled back, feeling a pang of guilt. She seemed nice, normal. Ethan found me a few minutes later, pulling me aside to introduce me to Professor Thompson, the head of the department. Amelia's been a real asset to the team this semester, Ethan said, his hand resting a little too long on my lower back. She's got a real bright future ahead of her. Professor Thompson nodded, his eyes glazed over. He was already halfway to the buffet table. Come on, Ethan said, leading me away. Let's get out of here. This is torture. We ended up in a quiet corner of the library, away from the noise and the crowd. We talked for hours about books, about politics, about our dreams for the future. It felt electric. The next day, Ethan emailed me asking if I was free to meet him at his office that evening. He needed help preparing for an upcoming exam, he said. It was last minute, he apologized, but he was really swamped. I hesitated. I knew this wasn't a good idea, but I also knew that I couldn't say no. When I arrived at his office, the building was deserted. The only light came from his desk lamp, casting long shadows across the room. He was sitting at his desk, papers scattered everywhere. He looked tired, stressed. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice soft. "I really appreciate it." We worked in silence for a while, reviewing notes and practice questions. The air was thick with tension. Then he leaned back in his chair, looking at me with an intensity that made my heart race. "You know," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "you're really amazing, Amelia. You're smart, you're talented, and you're beautiful." He reached out and took my hand. His touch was warm, insistent. I've really enjoyed working with you this semester," he continued, his eyes fixed on mine. "I feel like we have a connection." My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the moment I'd been subconsciously hoping for. I pulled my hand away. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "this isn't appropriate. You're my professor. You're married." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. I shouldn't have said that. It's just I've been under so much pressure lately. I'm not myself." He stood up and walked over to the window, turning his back to me. "Please," he said, his voice pleading, "don't tell anyone about this. It would ruin my career, my life." I stared at his back, feeling a mix of anger and disgust. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he'd been caught. "I think I should go," I said, grabbing my bag. "Amelia, please," he said, turning around. "Let's just forget this ever happened. We can still work together. I need you." "No," I said firmly. "I can't do this. I'm done." I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him standing there alone in the dark. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and fear. I avoided Ethan at all costs, skipping department meetings and making excuses to my students. He kept emailing and texting, apologizing, begging me to talk to him. It was a mistake. One email read, "I didn't mean anything by it. Please just give me another chance." I ignored them all. I confided in Chloe, finally admitting what had happened. She wasn't surprised. "I told you to be careful," she said, her voice sympathetic. "He's done this before." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach sinking. "He gets close to the new TAs, especially the ones he thinks are vulnerable. He plays the mentor card, then he crosses the line. It's always the same pattern." "Has anyone ever reported him?" Chloe shook her head. "Everyone's too afraid. They don't want to jeopardize their careers. They just try to ignore it and move on." I thought about reporting him, about filing a formal complaint, but I knew the risks. It would be my word against his. He had tenure, a reputation, the support of the department. I was just a TA, new to the university, with everything to lose. I decided to take a different approach. I scheduled a meeting with Professor Thompson, ostensibly to discuss my teaching performance. I subtly steered the conversation towards the departmental atmosphere, mentioning the pressure on TAs, the long hours, the lack of support. "I just want to make sure that everyone feels safe and respected here," I said, choosing my words carefully. "That there are clear boundaries between professors and students." Professor Thompson nodded, his eyes still glazed over, but I could tell that he was listening. He'd always struck me as an ineffectual administrator, but also a fundamentally decent person. I started applying for other jobs. I knew I couldn't stay at this university, not with Ethan still there, looming over me. I landed a new teaching assistantship at a different university, a smaller school with a more supportive environment. The pay was slightly less, but the opportunity felt like a lifeline. Before I left, I confronted Ethan one last time. I found him in his office, grading papers. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. "I got another job." He looked up, his face pale. "Amelia, I'm so sorry," he said. "I didn't want this to happen." "I know you didn't," I said. "You just wanted to see how far you could push me." I paused, taking a deep breath. "You're micro-cheating," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You're using your power to manipulate women, to make them feel special, to cross professional boundaries. And it's not okay." He stared at me, speechless. "I'm not going to report you," I continued. "But I'm also not going to be complicit in your behavior, and I'm leaving, and I'm never looking back." I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him standing there in silence. I started my new job a few weeks later. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my confidence and my career. I made sure to establish clear boundaries with my new colleagues, keeping my relationships professional and respectful. I heard through the grapevine that Professor Thompson had started paying closer attention to Ethan's behavior, that he'd been given a subtle warning about maintaining appropriate boundaries with his TAs. I don't know if Ethan ever changed. I don't know if he ever stopped his manipulative games, but I knew that I had done the right thing for myself. I had stood up for myself, even when it was difficult, even when it was scary. And that was enough. The new city felt cleaner, brighter, full of possibility. I bought a new plant for my apartment, a small succulent that seemed to thrive on neglect. I joined a hiking group and started exploring the trails outside the city. I even went on a few dates. It wasn't perfect. I still had moments of doubt, moments of regret, but I was moving forward. I was healing, and I was learning. The barista at the campus coffee shop gave me a knowing smile one day as I ordered my usual latte. "New beginnings, huh?" she said, winking. I smiled back. "Yes," I said, "new beginnings."